Today we're going to be talking about a practical guide to Main Street data collection and impact reporting. And so not only collecting information about your downtown, so you have that good base of knowledge of where your downtown is economically, but then also what do you actually do with those numbers? How can you show that impact? How do you use that for the organization and to show the community that, hey, positive things are happening in the downtown area? So today it's the Ben and Ben show. So first I'll introduce Ben Muldrow. So Ben Muldrow is a community branding and marketing specialist who has spent the last 18 years assisting over 600 communities across 40 states and 5 countries. And how many brand systems have you done in Missouri, Mr.
I think
Muldrow?
like 42 or so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we keep bringing him back because he does really good work in our Missouri communities. And so he does a lot of great work, travels a lot around the state. I just had him in the state last week. So as if he couldn't get enough of me, he gets to see me again on this webinar. So my name is Ben White. I'm the Senior Program Specialist in Missouri Main Street Connection. I'm in my 7th year with Missouri Main Street Connection. And so a lot of what my role focuses on is providing resources and trainings and best practices in my experience to programs all across the state of Missouri. We were fortunate enough to be in Macon and St. Genevieve last week, and we're going to be in future communities coming up, being able to just provide resources and trainings based off of what communities and programs need. So I'm actually going to first start this off and kind of get into the nuts and bolts of what to collect with this data that we do as Main Street programs. But first, why do we collect this data? What does it really, why does it benefit us as an organization to collect this information? So first, this information helps to provide you with a summary of the investment in your downtown district. I like to say the economic vitality point, and this is really where this kind of information, this data collection lies, is with the economic vitality point. Economic vitality is very research based. It's very, how do we actually measure what's going on in our downtown? What's our base knowledge of what's going on right now? And how do we actually create programming, create different things to help up level where we are with the economic vibrancy of the downtown area? And so really that's about trying to get a good base knowledge of where we're at and being able to track that progress over time. It's also about, like I said, measuring that progress over time. So this is actually a graph that I put together that helps to showcase all Missouri communities that are programs that have actually tracked this information that I'm going to be getting into from 2016 to 2025. All of those jobs created, all those jobs lost, and also the net jobs that came with it. And so all programs that have an agreement with Missouri Main Street Connection send this information to us on a quarterly basis. And so what we do is we actually use this knowledge to help educate people from across the state, our various stakeholders, the state of Missouri, National Main Street, about that good work that all of our programs are doing. And this is how we actually use all that information. And so you can see here just from this graph that and we're able to use this as a talking point, that even during the COVID years, the early COVID years, 2020, 2021, in our Missouri Main Street districts, we actually saw net growth in jobs created in our Missouri Main Street communities in our downtowns. And so this becomes a huge talking point, like I said, with legislators and other stakeholders that we're trying to create partnerships in order to help further downtown economic development in Missouri, because it shows that with this Main Street infrastructure, with these volunteers, with these this support and this guidance, that while the national trends are showing that jobs are being lost and businesses are going out, that because we have this in place, this support system, we're actually able to continue and actually grow through some of these tough times. And so, like I said, we use it on a state level, but also programs should be using these kinds of numbers on a local level as well. And so I like to use this graphic that Downtown Leaf Summit did. They started as a Main Street program back in 1989, but they wanted to show really what was the net growth of their downtown. And so they used all of these different statistics to help show and tell their story of investment in the downtown area. And so Downtown Leaf Summit since 2009 has seen 71 net new businesses. And so if you think about that, that is those businesses that have been created and those businesses that have left and gone away or moved out of the district. And so you're left with 71 net new businesses during that time. And so that becomes a huge talking point at a local level, not only to the community about the good work that the Main Street program is able to do at a local level, but also to different stakeholders at city council and some of those funding agencies as well. And so it's just as important to be able to show these kind of statistics and to brag and celebrate. I always like to say that as Main Street programs, we don't do a good enough job bragging and celebrating on ourselves as a Main Street program. And so this is just one of those ways that we're able to show that, hey, we had 4 new businesses open up in the past couple of quarters. So you can absolutely be able to celebrate that. And also, as Main Street programs, I think we tend to lose perspective on those on the investment that we've had in a downtown area because we just see these incremental changes over time. But if we're able to say, hey, just in the past year, we've been able to create 15 new jobs, which especially for a small community is monumental. And so being able to take all of that information and celebrate those successes because you're adding to the economic vibrancy of the downtown area is something that you absolutely should be doing as a Main Street program. So I wanted to give some best tips on how to actually collect this data. And so just a reminder that all Missouri Main Street programs that have an agreement with Missouri Main Street Connection actually collects and submits this data on a quarterly basis. But first, who actually collects this information? And so this is, again, one of those best tips that I like to always recommend is it shouldn't just be the work of 1 or 2 people trying to collect this information. Because what if that 1 or 2 people are on vacation and a new paint job happened that necessarily that person won't be able to recognize? Or let's say there's been some work on the inside of a business that maybe that person never actually goes into on a regular basis. And so you lose some of that economic data being tracked in these kinds of ways. And so being able to get a team together, primarily that economic vitality committee should be the ones responsible for collecting this information. And so one tip, one trick that I like to recommend too is if you have a monthly meeting with your economic vitality committee, maybe once a quarter go out and just walk the district. Make sure to note those different things that are happening in the downtown. This information should be collected in the service district that has been identified from the Main Street organization. So that's where it should just be collected. It shouldn't be a community-wide effort. But I wanted to also give you some more best practices as well. And so this information should come from a lot of different sources. And so you can't just rely on 1 or 2 of these sources in order to get all of the information. You know, you're not going to be able to see everything that goes on just by having eyes on the street and walking the district. Sometimes you have to have these conversations with business owners and property owners on those various things that are happening in the downtown area. Or it has to be conversations with city officials. If, for instance, you know, a property owner's like, I don't know if I want to tell you just how much I spent on my building. Many times they have to have building permits. The city officials can at least estimate the cost of what's going on with that particular renovation project. And so making sure that as you're collecting this information, you're getting the most accurate representation of the downtown investment, just using a lot of different sources, like I said, eyes on the street, conversations. This kind of work is very relationship heavy. Utilize the Economic Vitality Committee to divide and conquer at each monthly meeting. And so, not only at the Economic Vitality Committee meeting, I would also implore you to have this as part of the board meeting as well. Have 5, 10, 15 minutes just carved out and to ask, what did you see in the past month? What kind of investment did you see in the downtown area? Again, trying to make sure that it's not just on the with one or two people that are actually getting this done. That you are trying to actively engage volunteers on this kind of work. Something that I used to do is I would actually take, as a staff member of the Main Street program in Chillicothe, I would take long lunches sometimes. And I would, as I was coming back from lunch, I was fortunate enough to live just a couple of blocks off the downtown area. As I was coming back from lunch, I would keep a clipboard with me and just walk around and see that kind of investment in the downtown area. And so that just provided me just a great way to be able to get my eyes on it and be able to track that investment in real time. Partner with the city, county, and economic development, break it down into manageable parts. So I'm going to show you here on the next slide those areas that we do track as Main Street programs. And so be sure to say, hey, if you would just as a volunteer focus on the private investment in our downtown area, that would be great. Establish those relationships with building owners, establish those relationships with the city to be able to pull that information, and then maybe have someone that talks about those jobs that were created. And so break it up into manageable parts. Don't just say, hey, the entire committee focus on all of this information, break it down into manageable parts. And then my last one I wanted to focus on with this one is to have sign-in sheets for volunteer hours. One of the questions I always get asked is, what is a good way to actually track these volunteer hours? And my response is always, it depends. It depends on the organization, and depends on your volunteers and how they like to track hours. One of the ways that I used to do it is we would just pass around a document at each one of our board meetings and our committee meetings, and just track the volunteer hours from there. And then I would have volunteer tracking also at events as well. But it works different. Sometimes you can go digital with these kinds of approaches, or a mix thereof. You can do digital and hard copies of those things. And so really just figure out what works best for your organization so you have a good, accurate representation, because tracking volunteer hours is something that can really show that you're providing economic benefit to the downtown area by having this Main Street infrastructure in place. So here's those things that as a Main Street organization you should be tracking. And so this is not only information that if you have an agreement with us at Missouri Main Street Connection that you would actually be tracking as part of your quarterly report, but it's information that you should be tracking along the way as well, to be able to show, hey, just year over year, look at all this this investment that's going on in our downtown. So I'm going to quickly just go through these. The first one is public improvements. So what public improvements have happened in your downtown area in the past quarter? The next one is private building improvements in the last quarter. And again, this is very relationship building, because you have to have relationships with these property owners to be able to share this information. You saw in the previous graph, we don't at the state level do anything that necessarily outs people and how much they've actually spent on their building. It's not project by project specific. We just accumulate that data to help tell the story of downtown reinvestment. And so you can even use that with your conversations with property owners. The next one is new buildings or additions completed in the Main Street District. The next one is buildings damaged or lost in the Main Street District, new housing units, new businesses started or relocated to Main Street. And so this is a really important one to be able to tell the story. One of the things that we really talk about is vacancy rate, especially when you started as a Main Street program and where you're currently at. And so I like to say, um, I mentioned before, I was part of the Main Street program in Chillicothe. When they started their program back in 2001, they had a 25% vacancy rate. And so when I left in 2019, they had a 3% vacancy rate. But it was because of this tracking these businesses over time that have started up in the district and being able to show that, hey, since we started as a Main Street program to where we are now, um, we've been able to almost eradicate this vacancy rate in our downtown area. But again, it's tracking these changes over time, because especially new people coming into the organization, they're not going to necessarily have some of that knowledge from when it started as a Main Street program, why they started the Main Street program, because of this, lack of investment to happen in the downtown. They may be coming in on the forefront, where they see all the great things that have already happened in the downtown. And so being able to track that change over time can really help to tell your story of investment and your worth to the rest of the community. Next one is businesses closed or moved out of the Main Street district, businesses expanding or reducing, and then volunteer hours. I mentioned this is something that is very important, because there is a dollar amount that you can actually attribute to those volunteer hours that independent sector actually puts together. That you can show the community that, hey, your 400 hours that were donated in the past 2 quarters or over a year's time provided an economic value to the downtown and to your community, that you otherwise would have had to hire out someone to either provide those services in the downtown, or provide those economic development types of activities. So I'm going to briefly get into what we do with this data as we're transitioning over to Mr. Mondro, because he's going to talk about the kind of the bulk of really what we do with this kind of information. But I want to do at least a couple of slides on that before we get to his portion. So first, it becomes a talking point with various stakeholders in the community, whether it's a quarterly report to the city, whether it's on our website, whether it's meetings with elected officials as you're trying to show this information to them and get them invested in you, either financially or something that you're trying to pass as an organization. Through sponsors and press releases. And so the first one, like I said, is present to city council, civic groups, as you're trying to get people to understand why this Main Street program, why this is something that is providing benefit to the downtown area. These kinds of numbers can really resonate very quickly, especially if you have an impactful number. As I mentioned, that vacancy rate in Chillicothe was a very impactful number for us. And so we were able to very easily showcase our worth as a downtown economic development program by showing that our vacancy rate from when we started to when we ended. Being able to put it in things like annual reports, like you see here in Brookfield, that are disseminated out to not only the community at large, but being able to pull bits and pieces of that for various audiences, like these civic groups, like city council, all these different organizations, and being able to pull out what would resonate with them is something that is important. Or this is a great example that I've started to use from Stainberry, Missouri. They put together a gratitude report. And so this is essentially their information that they're giving back to their sponsors for the organization. And so they talk about a little bit about what's happened in the past year, not only with the events that have happened through these sponsorships, through the money raised from their community, but also what that investment meant and really what's happened in the past year. And so it becomes a huge talking point to be able to get additional dollars in the future. I like to say one of the things that really means a lot to donors is having that, hey, what was my money used for? And so they provide this as part of that report. But then they also talk about some of those other things that have happened in the downtown. And so it allows for sponsors, it allows for community members to continue to get excited about that good work that has happened in the downtown area and feel like their money was well spent and feels like their if their additional pledged dollars in the future will be used for good things. And then there's sponsorship opportunities, and so being able to put the accomplishments of what's happened not only with the organization, but again using some of these statistics, especially some of um, the uh, the really impactful statistics for those kinds of sponsorships. Again, being able to take some of these statistics and utilizing for different purposes is very important. And so what may work for sponsors may that data may work differently for city officials. It depends on the data that you're presenting and what really would resonate best with these various stakeholders. And so that's another tip and trick that I always like to share is don't just use the same data for every kind of presentation, of conversation. Figure out what will resonate with them and be able to present that to them. And then storytelling. And so being able to show why that business started in the downtown district is important. It's one thing to say, hey, we had 3 new businesses open up. If you're able to take one of those businesses and be able to tell the story of why they chose downtown. This is an example from Lebanon, Missouri. And so he actually had a craft beer place outside of the downtown area, but he saw what was happening in the downtown area and decided this is where I need to be. This is where the action is. Not only will my business be better, but there are so many positive things happening and vibrancy happening in the downtown area. I need to relocate my business to the downtown where everything is happening. And so you can get great quotes like this and be able to tell that story that will resonate with the community itself and be able to tell those stories. Sometimes numbers work and being able to say, hey, we had all these new businesses, but really anecdotally, these kind of stories resonate so incredibly well with especially community members that may not necessarily care as much about the numbers, but they do care about stories. They do care about the people in the community, especially in a small town. Everyone knows everyone, it seems like. And so being able to share these kinds of things will help to uplift the organization and what it is doing. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Muldrow for his part.
Fantastic. Let's make sure that you can see that.
Good.
Perfect. Well, again, thanks, Ben. Thanks for asking me to come out and chat with everybody. Got to spend a great week in Missouri last week. And I'm going to echo some of the things that Ben said and then give you some additional examples. As we dig into this topic, this whole idea of making the data emotionally compelling and really that idea of storytelling that moves people to act. I mean, you're doing the hard work. Ben shared with me the data collection tool, and I will tell you, it was robust and made me very, very tired just looking at it. So you are already required to put the work in. And what we want to do is give you some recommendations and some advice on some very easy ways that now that the hard work is done, you can use that data to just help to tell even more of that story. So let's start at the beginning. Nobody actually cares about your spreadsheet. From a numbers standpoint, the raw data, it's important for us when we're looking at the larger movement. It's important for us to look at the overall effectiveness and trends and that kind of thing. But the spreadsheet data is not going to move anybody to act. It's not going to motivate anybody to invest. It's not going to be the kind of thing that's going to have somebody say, man, I want to volunteer. So what we want to do is we really want to start to think about bridging that emotional gap. You send them the numbers, but what people actually feel, vacancies going from 7 to 6, new businesses, 3 new in a quarter. Downtown is coming back. We have 3 new businesses that opened their doors this quarter, 1 fewer empty storefront than last year, 241 neighbors gave their time. You can just see like it's the same data, it's framed in a different way. And being able to go through and make sure that we have it framed in a good positive way where it can work on our behalf, like that is super, super important for us. Same thing, that transformation, same facts, different effect, 3 new reasons to come downtown. Instead of just saying 3 new businesses open, 3 new reasons to come downtown. 2 buildings that look different than they did a year ago, 180,000 in private bets that downtown's worth investing in. You can see it's just a different way of framing that information. 1 in 7 storefronts still waiting for the right entrepreneur. 312 neighbors who chose to show up. So it's just a different framing. We call it opportunity framing instead of deficit framing. And I think this is an important thing for us to kind of think about. When you say 7 vacant storefronts in the district, they hear problems, failures, decline. Why would I invest in a dying town? When you say 7 market-ready spaces waiting for the right entrepreneur, they see potential growth timing. Tell me more about this market. So always, always, always think about how you can put your data in that opportunity framing mindset. Now, there are 5 questions that your data must answer. Number 1, why does downtown matter? 2, why should people invest here? 3, why should volunteers stay involved? 4, why should elected officials care? And 5, why should a business open here? If your data can't answer these, it's a report. If it can, it's a story. And I think that's really, really important for us to remember. So let's kind of go through this, the data that you already have. And believe it or not, it's more than you think. Not only are you doing your reporting data, but I know that Ben does have access to and was able to share with me some Esri reports. Those Esri reports have a wealth of information, everything from retail leakage, psychographics, demographic information. So that stuff can combine for some really, really compelling storytelling. So think about your data inventory. Some of these you might already be collecting. Ben told the story about his long lunch. Nothing like getting advice from your state staff member telling you should be taking long lunches. And as long as you carry a clipboard with you, it's justified, it's work. So definitely, as you're walking around, you should have a rough idea about your vacancy rates. You should have a rough idea about the space that's open. Collecting before and after photos. I've got one director who says they always have their phone out and they just snap pictures along the way. And if you're on Android or Apple, you can sit there and you can organize everything by geography and you can look at all the photos from a single place. It becomes very easy. Business openings. Making sure that you've got a really good understanding of the new, the closed, the relocated, the expanded. Ben talked about volunteer hours. How do you measure it? At the end of the day, this is one of those things where it's kind of an exacting estimate. It's like we guess and we hope, but these are some important numbers for us to understand. And to be honest, I have kind of an interesting argument on this. I think that sometimes we think that the larger that number, the better. But I think one of the things that is really amazing about Main Street and something that we should promote more is not just the volunteer hours, but the volunteer efficiencies. Look at the amazing things that we can do with 7 people and 28 hours a month. And so don't always go out with this idea of the more hours, the better. Like we always want help. But at the same time, it's like we got to realize that having a good understanding of our actual organizational capacity as it relates to the hours a month we can spend is a huge open door for the way that we can truly be effective. I see Amber saying in the chat, small but mighty. You're exactly right. Like that is so very important for us. Event attendance, head counts, RSVPs, social reach, that is a big number for us. Knowing the people that we're touching, that are involved, that are getting positive experiences that we're creating. Private investment numbers, seeing how our work is stimulating the private sector to invest real dollars in the district, and real dollar investments in the district convert into higher property values, which then connect with property taxes, which then connect with tax base. So all of these things are connecting all in that storytelling. Foot traffic, simple observation counts by block, by hour. Some of these things, foot traffic can, if you've got really good relationships with some of your merchants, they might share transaction numbers, not dollar numbers, but they might be able to share with you, sales days. If you've got a tourism organization in your community that has access to Placer AI, you can actually go in and you can use cell phone data to look at saturation rates during the hours of the day, days of the week, all that kind of stuff. Of course, social engagement. All of these areas in social engagement are hugely measurable. We can tell you how many followers we have. We can talk about our engagement. And then one of the other things that I think is really, really important is that upper floor housing number. Occupied or improved residential units, the number of people that call downtown home, those are huge numbers for us. Some simple tools that you can use to tell these big stories. Google Forms. Pretty much at this point, I think everybody's got access to a Google account. So being able to use those forms to set up surveys, event feedback, visitor intercept, being able to constantly kind of share and use that format to keep your thumb on the temperature of your business community and what their thoughts are. Shared spreadsheets, monthly vacancy tracking, business inventory, volunteer logs. If you start to have a running data spreadsheet that your board members have access to as they're walking around, as they're visiting the district, they might be able to kind of add data in there. Constantly using your camera, before and afters, taking pictures of the same corner over the course of the year, showing how your district constantly changes, constantly evolves. Clipboard surveys, reinforcing what Ben said, just going out there and making notes and writing down things that you see. QR code feedback, post-event surveys, real-time merchant sentiment. As you walk around and visit people, what if you had a little QR code card that sent people out where you could get more information? And then the idea of district scorecards, monthly or quarterly health snapshots across all metrics, where you can start to just have almost a dashboard where you're looking at these numbers, and you can give this on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month type basis. But you can understand that if you have all of this at your fingertips, now all of a sudden it becomes so much easier for you to share that information because it's there. It doesn't turn into work just to research it. You've got it there at the ready. You do not need to become a data scientist to become a better storyteller. You just need to start paying attention and writing it down. Start with one thing, track it consistently, and tell people what it means. Whether you are obsessed with the banners in your downtown, or whether you have noticed how one merchant started putting flowers out front and it became infectious, and you are tracking the new plants and flowers that get added each and every week, just go for it. It does not have to be some sort of multifaceted $100,000 marketing campaign. We don't work that way in Main Street, but focusing on the little things and digging in and really learning and sharing what that stuff means. Now, next up, we want to talk about data as advocacy. Data without advocacy is just a report that nobody reads. And I cannot say that enough. I love numbers, believe it or not, even though a lot of you might have come across me with design and that kind of stuff. I have a very analytical mind. I love numbers and how they work. But if we don't turn those numbers into something that people can relate to, then we're missing the point. And I'll never forget, I don't tell this story very often, but the whole way that I got into this business was my older brother, Trip, was a planner and was doing downtown master plans. And he would do retail leakage. He would look at these numbers and he would run all the math. And then he would sit there and he would say, okay, based off the numbers, they can support another 3 to 4 locally owned nice restaurants in their downtown. Well, that's where most people would stop it. What we started to do was we started to take it to the next level. And it's like, it's not good enough to say that. We would create a mock advertisement for that next new business with a photo of a family celebrating their child's graduation. What better place to share your life's milestones than in the heart and soul of your community, a place where everybody belongs? Boom. Oh, okay. So this idea of figuring out how you can walk that down the road and tell the story that people love, that's how it works. So this was the quarterly report from Cape Girardeau that Ben shared with me. So this is literally just raw data. This is your spreadsheet, right? Now, because I know that you guys have ample time and love to do a lot of new tasks, I have tried to give you some examples of how to make this as easy as possible. And I want to show you what some of that stuff can look like. So let's kind of go through and let's talk a little bit about what the best Main Street organizations do. They don't just report data, they weaponize it. They influence their city councils. They present economic data regularly. They give elected officials something to brag about. That is so unbelievably important. Give elected officials something to brag about and do it often. If you make them feel smart, they are going to support you and support you and support you. The second thing they do is secure funding. Investment metrics belong in every grant application, not buried in the appendix. 3, they recruit businesses. They show market opportunity data to prospective tenants before they ask for it. 4, they justify their staffing. They demonstrate a return on investment on professional Main Street management with hard numbers. 5, they build sponsor value. They show sponsors exactly what their investment produced, the reach, the attendance, the coverage. 6, they create urgency. They use vacancy data to mobilize property owners and community leaders to act now. So here's your advocacy toolkit. So I'm just going to give you some ideas. The first one, I think it is good for you guys to have a 1-page infographic, annual highlights, and a shareable visual form. I'll tell you what I did. I literally took Cape Girardeau's data and I dropped it into Chat GPT, and I also used one called Claude, and I'll kind of show you some of the differences. Because guess what? We don't have time to spend 5 hours producing everything that the Ben said you should do. So how do we make it easy and make it usable? So these are the exact same data sets. I took the report from each of them. The one on the left-hand side is from Claude, Claude. The one on the right is from ChatGPT. I did make sure to upload the logo with it and ask for them to tap into the brand style. So those things I think are really, really important for us. So again, these aren't beautiful. They're not going to win any awards, but guess what? It literally takes less than 5 minutes. So now all of a sudden it can be a starting point. I will say this, one of the things that we're starting to notice is AI engines have always had a distinctive design style. That style is evolving, it is improving, but it's not winning. And what's happening is as more and more people are using it, then what we're seeing happening is things are starting to look more homogenous. My hope is if you start with something like this, but make the call out, be honest about it. Say, you know what? I know that this is not great. If you're a designer in our community and you would love to help make this better, please reach out. It's a great way because there are some designers that they They love the idea of being able to participate, but honestly, sometimes they have to be a little bit irritated on the front end. And, so sharing it, but acknowledging that it's like, we know that we can do better. And if you can help us, we are open. Um, Next up, our annual report. Ben showed a couple of these. I always like to share the impact report. I know that you guys have a lot of communities have kind of explored this format. It's a 4-page format that shares everything about impacts and numbers. This is something that they do throughout the state of Michigan. I think that that's a huge, huge tool for us. If you spend the time, you do that once a year, you get a lot of that information in one place. If you design it the right way, realistically, it could actually be designed in such a way where it's almost like a series of standalone one-pagers that then combine into a singular annual report. So just think about that. Next up, social media graphics. This is a system that we created. This was actually for Washington Main Street. For the statewide program, they did an economic impact study and then needed some help knowing how to share it. So we did this whole campaign we called Main Street is Built for This. But it talks about the jobs. It talks about the access of the people, the direct financial impact, all of that stuff. This just gives you some ideas. These aren't great social media posts, but they just kind of get your head turning. And then same thing, just because I want you to think about efficiency, I've had the same information. It was already in ChatGPT. So I said, Chat, can you create a series of 12 standalone social media posts that you would share from this data? And this is the page that it created. So again, you're probably not going to want to take these and run with them exactly, but if you're using Canva, now all of a sudden you've got some pretty good workable kind of inspiration for how to go through. And now, with one prompt, if you're sharing this once a week, you got 3-4 months worth of content just like that. So think about that efficiency and thinking about ways that you can kind of tap into it. Next up, sponsored packet. Ben hit on this as well. The idea of leveraging this information and this data to reinforce your organizational effectiveness so that when people invest in you, they're truly investing, they're not giving charity. And that is a different mindset. If you believe in what you're doing, then the people who are supporting you are getting true benefit. They're not just helping out of the goodness of their hearts. So a couple of examples here. And I put these pages in here because I'm going to share this PDF with everybody. But we did create this guide to single ask sponsorships. In this, it kind of walks you through the process of creating a really, really nice, tight single ask sponsorship package. And then it's got a couple of examples. This is from Saline, Michigan, where it's just a 2-page package. So on the front, they highlight all of their different events that they do for the year. And then on the back, they package together the different ways that you can sponsor and the different levels and the different price points that you can come in at. Some other examples, Joplin kills this. They've got a great one. Port Washington, Wisconsin, Hanover, Pennsylvania, and Lawrenceville, Georgia. So just some other examples there. And then once again, same data already in ChatGPT, ask it to go out, and I asked it to look for events, look at social media, look at website, and it took a stab at what one of these might look like for Cape. So again, just keeping those wheels turning. Next up, state of downtown snapshot. This is a quick hit summary for city council presentations. So literally, because they're in that like state of the city, state of the state type mindset, just you being the one that delivers the economic health and the momentum of the district to the council is hugely important. So a couple of examples here. We were in St. Genevieve last week. This was something that we kind of put together with them with some of their data, just so they could kind of see some market data, some trends. And then guess what? I asked ChatGPT to do it for CAPE again. So using the same data, it formatted in a slightly different way, designed to be an 8.5 by 11 so you can print out, leave behind. You could imagine with these, you could kind of dig in, and these really could become the components of a 3-minute report presentation to council. If you can hit the points in 3 minutes and you can show them the progress, the sweet spot in communicating to elected officials is frequency and efficiency. So they like to see you a lot, and they like to know that you're not wasting their time. If you show up and every time you present, it's a 12 to 15-minute presentation at their council, then they start to groan every time they see you. If you get up and you pound through it and you give them good information, you give them those tidbits that make them feel smart, then you're going to keep cooking with gas. And then finally, the economic development one pager. Now, this can be a little bit more refined. It can be a little bit more focused on some of our numbers. This was something, again, that we did for St. Genevieve last week. This was kind of a targeted economic categories of the businesses that they were going after with some of the leakage and that kind of thing. But again, same stuff, looking at Macon. I threw some of Ben's Esri reports that he had done. I simply uploaded those to ChatGPT and said, what would you do? Now, the thing that I did not do, you can kind of see some of the buildings are off and some of that kind of stuff. Always remember to include any of your brand elements, your logos, your colors, and that kind of thing, and ask it to wrap that with that. So at the very least, we're trying to get into that same brand system. That one data set, 4 different stories, knowing your audience, it's like with our city council, we're showing the investment multiplier. For every $1 of public investment, our downtown generates $6 in private response. For our prospective business, we're using that information to show, your category has 2.1 million in unmet local demand. This is your market to own. Sponsors, your logo reached 4,200 people at our 4 fall events alone. And volunteers, here's what 312 volunteer hours accomplished this year. This is your work. So the way that you share it and who you're talking to makes a big difference. Understanding that every Main Street has a story arc. You're in a chapter. Do you know what chapter you're in? So a lot of times this is not science, but this is just kind of me getting my thoughts down. Year 1 to 2, that's where we're kind of stabilizing, organizing, filling critical gaps. Year 3, 4, that's where we start to build a little bit of momentum. We start to do some wins. Community begins to believe, cautiously optimistic, we say. 5 to 6 is when we really start to land on a true identity as an organization. People start to really discover what's going on. It takes that long for something that we're doing to become known. 7 to 9, that's that investment period. That's where we're starting to see more of that private capital comes in with, and it's such an important phrase, private capital follows public confidence. And then that 10-year plus transformation, that's the downtown you always knew was possible, but it's also where sometimes what happens is when you've been doing it for about 10 years, you find yourself back in the stabilization phase. You find yourself in the reinventing phase. So like once you kind of work your way through the sequence, you bounce back to another part. You either bounce back, it might be that you kind of have done your thing. And perfect example is some really, really cool projects that have just gone online in Lee's Summit. And now Lee's Summit has almost bounced back to the identity phase. New things, new ingredients, new personality. And now we're having to reintroduce everybody to this new, cooler level. So that's important for us to kind of know. Main Street revitalization is not one project. It is the accumulation of measurable moments. And the thing that we want you guys to do is to be able to effectively and efficiently communicate all of those measurable moments. So 5 most important metrics. Number 1, vacancy. knowing those numbers. Vacancy is the most visible sign of a district's health. It shapes perception before any conversation happens. How to track it: walk the district monthly, log every ground floor space as occupied, vacant, or in transition. A color-coded block map: red's vacant, green's occupied, gray's in progress. Simple, visual, urgent. And this, I think, is, I want to be very, very deliberate here. This is a task that can be completely self-contained and one person can do, and it doesn't have to be the director. So being able to understand that, like, having a vacancy czar is okay. Like, you can have one, that old person that loves to just walk around downtown, put your sticker on the back of a clipboard, give it to them, and make it their job, and they will love it. Next up, tracking investment. Private investment is the most powerful proof of confidence in your downtown. It follows perception. Log facade improvements, building rehabs, new equipment, signage upgrades, new construction annually. Have a running total bar chart that grows year over year. Show the cumulative number prominently. Next up, number 3, activity. A busy downtown feels like a thriving downtown. Activity creates perception, and perception creates investment. That is the whole thing that we want to think about with our strategic event schedule. If events are burning us out and are not creating vibrancy and are not creating market confidence, then we need to revisit how we're using our resources. Log event attendance, foot traffic counts, business openings, total hours of activation. That's a funny one. Total hours of activation. With the work that you do, how many hours of vibrancy have you created in your district? Really, really cool number to have. Combined events and total attendance is a downtown presence score. Make it feel alive. Next up, volunteer capacity. Volunteer hours are your most honest measure of community investment and organizational strength. Running a clock visual, your community has invested X hours in downtown this year. And then finally, perception. Data without sentiment is incomplete. How people feel about your downtown matters as much as the numbers. A simple annual survey, 5 to 8 questions, QR codes at events, links in the newsletter, before and after sentiment cards show the trend. In 2022, 41% felt downtown was improving. Today it's 68%. Community confidence has grown 27 points in 3 years. The story is working. So using that data to help push it forward. People support what they can see. So the most powerful advocacy tool you have is visibility. Document everything, show change repeatedly, communicate constantly, celebrate visibly, and invite people in. Just a suggested kind of quick day, 30-day quick start. Walk your district and count every ground floor vacancy, write it down. Next week, take a photo from 3 consistent spots. Call that your baseline imagery. Week after that, set up a free Google form with 5 questions for merchant sentiment. Week after that, write 1 social media post that turns into one piece of data, and turns one piece of data into a human story, and then repeat that. And it's simple. It's a couple minutes a day, and it will start to make huge, huge impact. So in closing, just remember, your downtown is already changing. Your job is to help people see it. Go document something this week. So with that, we nailed it. We're wrapping right up at 10 o'clock. So any questions in the chat, anything that anybody wants to hit on? And just to reiterate, I have saved this presentation as a PDF. I will send that over to Ben White and he can share it with everybody. Yep. But thank you guys so much for coming out.
Yeah, we'll have a few minutes here if you have any more questions. But yeah, just to kind of put a bow on this, the collection of this data is so important, especially if you're doing it for the quarterly report, but that should be the baseline. And so there should be things that maybe you want to know even outside of that. Ben mentioned earlier, social media reach, that might be important for sponsors, for investors to see that information. And so figure out what is impactful at a local level, and that answer is different with every community. Excelsior Springs does a great job of figuring out what additional data they need to collect and actually how to use it for their different various audiences. And so be able to track that information even beyond what is in the quarterly report. And then I guess the last thing in the last minute that we had here is Minimal Joe likes to say, nobody marks on Washington because of a spreadsheet. And so I always like to say that in different communities. And so figure out, I don't want this to just be data collection for the sake of data collection. It should be, what are we doing with this data? Are we using this data in ways that Ben Wildrow actually shared here during the presentation? And how are we using that for the various audiences that we have in our community to help tell our story, not only of our organization, but that investment into our downtown area. And so that's so very important. I think that's really, if I was to put a theme to this presentation, it's not just data collection for the sake of data collection, because that will resonate with a small portion of the audience that we're trying to reach, but how are we actually promoting that in various ways, putting some graphics to it and telling that story. So I think with that, we're at 10 o'clock. So I'll go ahead and I'll end this presentation. Just thank you everyone for attending today, and this will be uploaded to YouTube here in the next couple of days. But with that, everyone have a great day. Thank you.